Okay, welcome everybody to the Parsha class, Parshat Vayera 5782. This class is sponsored by Robert and Claire Siegel in memory of Robert's mother, Rivka Bat Baruch. And Neshama should have an aliyah, and her memory should be a blessing and should be a zchut for all of us and for her for her family. The Parsha Vayera is the first 7 plagues, but before that, there's quite a bit more to the story. We have the 4 levels of Geula, 4 Lashonot of Geula, depending on if you like the what the Torah Tamima says about that. But either way, the 4 stages perhaps of how Hashem is going to rescue the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim are mentioned. And basically, Hashem gives Moshe a pep talk. The end of last week's Parsha, Moshe was pretty down. He seemed that the mission that he was sent on seemed to be a dismal failure, the opposite of what he intended. Absolutely nothing good seemed to have been gained. And Hashem is telling him, no, this is exactly what we need to happen in order for the redemption of the Jewish people to happen the way it's supposed to be. So there's going to be a lot in this week's Parsha. A lot of the references, a lot of what we're going to see is that at least some of the questions that I sent out in the email today are definitely all about why certain plagues are described differently than other plagues. There's obviously some sort of a system going on, and there are a ton of different opinions about why each plague happened, how they happened, etc., etc. So with no further ado, let's get right into the source sheet. I thought I sent it. One moment. Let's see, let's do it this way. That's the way to do it. Okay, so let's see. There we go. All right, Baruch Hashem. Okay. All right. So we are going to start with Shemot 7:15, Zayin Tet Vav. So Hashem tells Moshe, Lech el Paro, go to Paro Baboke in the morning. We know the Rashi tells us from the Midrash that that Paro had some sort of complex. He wanted people to think that he was a god, so he wouldn't go to the bathroom all day. He'd only go early in the morning when nobody was up. Because obviously, what kind of God goes to the bathroom, right? So, Hine Yotze Hamaima, he's going to be going out by the water. Nitzavta likrato al sfat hayor. So go and position yourself in such a way that he'll see you at the water. And take with you the take with you the staff, the stick that had been previously turned into a nachash, which is usually translated as snake. We'll just keep it at that for now. And on this verse or thereabouts, the Abarbanel has a comment to try to explain, because this is going to be the first of the 10 plagues, dam, blood. Moshe is going to, actually Aaron is going to hit the water, and then the water of the Nile River is going to turn to blood, and that is going to affect Egypt. So, like I said, there are going to be different opinions about how the plagues were organized. We're first going to look at the Abarbanel, and then we'll take a look. We'll fast forward a couple of hundred years in history and look at what Rav Hirsch wrote about this. And some of these are long pieces, but we'll sort of cut them short. So the Abarbanel is actually on 7:14 if you want to look it up on your own. So he says, Paro hayacholek al Moshe b'shlosha shorashim. Pharaoh had an argument with Moshe really on 3 topics, on 3 core ideas, 3 principles. Moshe haniach b'mitziat siba rishona michiyuv hatzmiut b'atzmo Pharaoh hachkichish miatzetu omrosh, quotes the pasuk in Shemot Daled Bet, lo yadati et Hashem. In other words, Moshe assumed that there is, or correctly, that there has to be a necessary God. There has to be a one, a first God, a first creator, or what's Siba Rishona is called in medieval commentaries, meaning the first cause, the thing that started things going. Obviously, there has to be a creator of the world, in other words. Paro didn't believe that. Paro denied that. How do we know? Because like he just quoted, Lo yadati et Hashem. I don't know this Hashem. Who's this Hashem who's sending you? I don't know a God. There doesn't have to be a God. So that's the first principle that Moshe and Paro disagreed on. Shosh Hashenihu, and the second one, Shemoshe Haniach Shehalva Mishkiach B'chol Darke B'nei Ha'adam Tet Leish Kidrachav. So Moshe obviously believed, the second principle that Moshe believed in is that Hashem watches over people. Not only did he create the world, which is definitely one of our core beliefs, but a second one of our core beliefs, that he's mishkiach of the world. He's still here. He's watching over us. He didn't just make the world, put it on its axis, put it on a spin, and then walk away. He's here. He's watching us. There's hashgacha pratit, etc., etc. So that's another belief of Moshe's, that Moshe believed, that Paro didn't believe. How do we know? Paro omro mi Hashem, and that second part of that verse where Paro says, "I don't know God. Who is this God?" So what was the point of saying, "Who is this God"? He's saying, "Who is he now? What has he done for me lately?" Right? Well, who is it? What's he doing? He's not around. Even if there is a God, even if there was a creator in the world, I don't see any kind of hashgacha. I don't see any kind of supervision of the world. Good things happen to bad people. Bad things happen to good people. Explain that to me, right? So that's the kind of thing that Paro did not believe. And the third thing that Moshe and Paro disagreed on, Moshe heniach she'alva hamashkiach hu elokei Yisrael bal hakochot v'yicholot yachol lishnot tavai dvarim umechadasham. So Moshe believed that not only does Hashem watch over people and give out reward and punishment, but also he can change the nature of things. Nature isn't stuck. It isn't. It is able to be changed by miracles. Miracles do happen. As Hashem wishes, in small details and bigger things, Hashem can do anything he wants. Right? Hashem is all powerful; he can do anything he wants. So Paro, and he said, "Mi Hashem asher eshma b'kolo." The rest of that verse over there, he said, "Who is Hashem that I should listen to his voice?" What did he mean to say? Ritzono lomar ma yacholet yesh bo she'akna lefanav shmo b'kolo. What has he done? What can he do that I have to listen to his voice? I don't believe in miracles. Nature is nature. The river's going to flow, water's going to come, rain, the seasons. There's no miracles in the world. That's what Paro said. And that's why the makot came. For these three things. In other words, there is a God, that idea that there is a God. Number two, that he watches over us. And number three, that he creates miracles. All three of those things, all three of those principal ideas are in the plagues, says the Abarbanel. Okay? So, hine mipnei zeh bao hamakot, mikavanot le'emet shloshet hashorshim ha'ele, le'emet mitziut hakel, for the truth that there is, God can be found in this world, bao shlosh makos harishonot. Because of that came the first three makot. Le'emet shorosh hasheni, for the third principle, that Hashem is watching over every detail, that there's a hashgacha. It's on aloma sheyesh sham eloka mashgiach manhid bo shlosh hamakot hashniot. The second three of the makot came to prove that idea, that Hashem is watching over us, that there is a providence, as it's called, right? And the last three, or sorry, the third three, the last four, as Hashem desires, Hashem wants, he can change the nature of things as he did. Right? It's the completely unnatural status of the last three plagues, especially if they take, for example, hail, which was fire and ice. It's this relationship that shouldn't exist together. So we're going to learn about that more in the next parsha. But it's completely unnatural. Yeah, animals die. That's not so unusual. It could have been a plague. The frogs can come out of the Nile River. That has happened before, especially if it wasn't frogs, if it was alligators, as some commentaries explain. Makes a lot of sense because the Nile is filled with alligators, so it makes a lot of sense. It's a totally normal, natural thing. Okay, maybe a lot more than usual. Frogs jumping into your mouth. Okay, that's unusual. Okay, but that's already midrashic. But the actual first three plagues aren't so amazingly impossible. Water turning red. Okay, it's disgusting, turning to blood. Okay, I get it. It's nasty. But if like a whole lot of fish, you can watch it on the Nature Channel or whatever. If if a fish dies in the water, there's blood all over the place. It looks like it's all bloody. All right, so it can happen. Without getting into the midrash of how it happened, whether it happened to the Jews or not, that's a completely different issue. Okay, so now let's look at Rav Hirsch on this pasuk. We said that he comes to the water, and we're going to skip down a little bit. Rav Hirsch says, and I'll just read it in English because it's easy to do because it's in English. I'm not going to read it in German because I don't have that anyway. And I don't speak German. All right. Anyway, we have now come to the beginning of the Eser Makot. Let us begin our study with an overview. That's what we're looking for. What is the system? What is the process of these Makot? Rabbi Yehuda had already arranged them into three groups. We know this from the Seder, right? We say Datzach, Adash, Ba'achav. That those three groupings are going to have a lot to do with Rav Hirsch's interpretation. So this grouping is immediately self-evident from the narrative itself. The first two plagues in each group are preceded by a clear warning. Like the third plague never has a warning, interestingly enough. Whereas the third in each group, in other words, Kinim or Shchin or Choshech, comes without warning. All three of them had no warning, interestingly enough. The implication is that the third plague comes as a punishment for failure to respond properly to the preceding two plagues. Closer inspection reveals a correspondence between these three groups and the three basic aspects of the Egyptian galut, which he talks about more earlier, but I think he summarizes it here pretty well, which were to be eliminated by the redemption. The gerut, which is the fact that the Jewish people were made to feel different, were second-class citizens. The avdut, which is the fact that the Jewish people became slaves. It was difficult work, and the inui, which is the actual suffering that the Jewish people had. They were not just slaves; they were beaten. Their children were killed. Terrible things happened to them. So those three stages of the Egyptian galut, of the Egyptian exile, are going to be fixed by the three groupings of the plagues. These were the components of the affliction that Egypt brought upon Israel. And he references here where he says that in his commentary of 114:6:6. And in these lay Egypt's sin. These same conditions, Gerut, Avdut, and Inui, were now, through the plagues, to be brought also upon the Egyptians, to press upon them that their lording it over this hapless people was without justification, and to make them feel upon their own flesh the bitterness of the affliction they brought upon their victims. So Dam, Arov, and Barad, which is the first of the plagues of each of those three groups, demonstrated to the Egyptians that they themselves were merely Gerim in their own land, and hence they were hardly in a position to treat Israel as Gerim and to deprive them of their rights. So because the Egyptians made the Jews feel like second-class citizens, the blood, the many animals that came and the hail all made the Egyptians feel sort of foreign in their own land. Sfardea, Dever, and Arbe. So the frogs or alligators, crocodiles, whatever you want to call it. So it's Sfardea, Dever, which is the animal disease, and Arbe, which is the locusts, showed them how illusory were the notions that made them feel superior to the people whom they had reduced to Avdut. Right? Usually, when people have slaves, regardless of the color of those slaves, people lord over those slaves and make them feel as if they're less than human or less human than the master. That's a problem. So it's an illusion. We play this game in our heads that we want to feel superior to the people that we're ordering around, and this doesn't have to be actual slavery. It can be a terrible employer, right? It could be all kinds of situations. It's not right to treat your worker like they're nothing and that they're not important. Their opinion should be asked for whenever possible. We learned that from H-Shem himself in Bereshit when he asked the angels who had nothing to do with creation. He asked them how he should make the mankind. So okay, so anyway, that's a Rashi. Anyway, and the last category, Kinim, Shchin, and Choshech. So were aniyim. They made the Egyptians pain, the boils, right? The bites they got from the creatures and everything else. The darkness, all of that gave the Egyptians physical pain. The same type that they made them feel what it means to have to submit to a systematic regime of Inui. Just like the Jewish people had to suffer daily, regularly from the pain and suffering, the whips, the killings that the Egyptians put upon them. So now the Egyptians feel the same thing. Machat Bechorot, which is of course the ultimate, the last one, the death of the firstborn, concluded the series and finally brought about Israel's redemption. Accordingly, the plays can be arranged as follows. And he does this beautiful chart here, which if you're watching, you can see. So again, he's got the category of Gerut. He's got Dam, Arov, and Barad under that. He's got the category of Avdut, of slavery. He's got Sfardea, Dever, and Arbe under that. And he's got Inoi, which is that's pain and suffering. He's got Kinim, Shchin, and Choshech under that. So all of these groupings all make sense. Each of these three groups of plagues were intended to cure the Egyptians of the delusion that they had the right to inflict Gerut, Avdut, and Inoi upon the Israelites. That Tzach was to accomplish his purpose by demonstrating God's power over water and land, right? In other words, all of the first three plagues all started from the water and the land, right? That's why Aaron had to hit the water for the water to turn red. He had to hit the water for the frogs to come out of it. And the Kinim also came from the land. So by demonstrating God's power over, Adash, by demonstrating God's power over the inhabitants who lived on the land, right? The actual people who lived there. That's where those particular plagues really resided and started from. Ba'achav or Ba'ach, and then the last one is not mentioned here. By demonstrating God's power over the atmosphere that surrounded the land and its inhabitants, the air, the snow, the fire, in other words, all of the elements of the atmosphere were involved in that. All right, so Dam, Arov, Barad had to do with Gerut. A ger is one whose residence is in a country depends upon the goodwill and tolerance of others. Egypt's self-assurance derived from its river. Thanks to the Nile and its annual overflow, the Egyptians were arrogant upon their own soil. So that's why it had to start with the Nile, because that's where they got this feeling that they're so much better than anyone else. And they felt superior to any other nation. They even imagined themselves to be independent of the gifts of heaven, saying, as it says in Yecheskel, Li Yo'ori V'ani Asitini. And by means of Makadam, God said to them, Li, if I will it, your river will not only dry up, will bring you decay instead of blessing and prosperity, and will spew you out from your land. You yourselves are only gerim upon this land. You will stay on it only as long as that is my will. That's what H-Shem is telling them. Makat Arov, show that only by God's decree do the animals of the wild, Arov is from Arbe, make room for man. So really, you don't usually see animals, wild animals around. They're usually hidden away, they're hiding, they're afraid of people. But that's up to Hashem. If he wants to, he'll snap his fingers, metaphorically, and then the animals will just be all over the place. We obviously, that would make us very uncomfortable. God is only to give the word, and the barrier between man and beast will fall. Then man will no longer be safe, even in his own home, and the beast will avoid only the area inhabited by the people, whom the Egyptians now regard as strangers with no civil rights. Finally, and this is again, this is a much longer piece, but just to finish off this paragraph, we're not going to get into all the other categories, but finally, by sending Barad, which is the hail, God showed the Egyptians to their great shock that no more than a nod from above was needed to cause a total upheaval in the country's climate. Egypt has little precipitation. Whatever moisture it receives comes from the Nile. Thus, the Egyptians had never seen hail before. Now, suddenly, they see a drastic change in their atmospheric environment, and the first hailstorm they had ever witnessed comes as an ominous warning that they may suddenly find themselves living under completely changed climatic conditions. This explains why the impending hailstorm were announced to them in the words, Ki b'pam hazot ani sholech et kol migovotai al libecha. Now I'm going to send all of my plagues on your heart. We're going to go back to that verse later on, but at least just so you get an idea, and you can also look at this essay. It's a beautiful piece. There's a couple more paragraphs to read. But anyway, I just wanted to point out to you that there is a system. The 10 plagues weren't just like a random, God's up in heaven going, what should I throw at them next? Firebolts? Nah, it's too Greek. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure what they would do if I gave them a flood. Would probably build an ark. I don't need that. So no, he had everything all planned out. All of the 10 plagues made a lot of sense in either system, whether you take the Abarbanel's explanation or Rav Hirsch. All right, we're going to try to speed through this a little bit because there's a lot to say. These parshiot are just jam-packed. There's so much to say. I've already probably gotten enough material for next year's class. That's not even skimming the surface. All right, let's skip a whole chapter to chapter 8, verse 15. So Chet Tetvav. So as we said before, this particular plague by Kinim, by the plague of the locusts, it says Vayomer HaChartumim, the magicians, astrologers, however you want to translate Chartumim, they said El Paro, they said to Paro, Et Belokimhi, this is the finger of God. V'yechazek, v'yechazak, Lev Paro, but Paro's heart became strong. V'lo shema alehem kasher diber Hashem, and he did not listen to them as Hashem had forewarned. So that's basically the verse. They were so scared they did not they thought that this particular plague was such a major, huge deal that it was for sure that that this is the finger of Hashem. This is proof that Hashem did this. Very nice. Now, why? Well, what was different about this plague than the other plagues? Remember, they had Dam, they had Sardea. Only at Kinim did the astrologers, the magicians wake up and say, whoa, this is the finger of God. Everything else, that was child's play. So we'll have Rashi's famous answer in a moment. But let's look at some other answers. First, we're going to look at the Ibn Ezra, and then we'll look at the Ramban, who by the way quotes the Ibn Ezra, but does not agree with him. So basically, Ba'avur, he says, Ba'avur sha'asu masa aron k'masa aron b'dvar hatanin. So he says that since these Khartoumim were able to do what Aaron did with the whole tanin issue, whether that's serpent or crocodile or whatever, gam hamakot hadam hatzfardea. So too with the blood and the frogs. And there's the Khartoumim were able to do those same makot just like Aaron. But here, v'lo yachlu ata lasot ken. But now they were not able to copy Aaron. Amaru Paro, that's why they said lo ba'azot hamaka al yedei Aaron ba'avur Yisrael. They said to Paro, this plague isn't coming through Aaron for the Jewish people. Rak makat elokim hi kifi ma'arechet hakochavim al eretz Mitzrayim. This plague is from God because of the constellations, because of the influence that we have, that the stars have over Egypt. In other words, which Elokim are they talking about? Is it Elokim, or does it mean like this idea that they had the nature God, the mother nature or father nature or whatever, the stars and their influence on us? So that's what Ibn Ezra is saying. That's what they're saying. This isn't Aaron did this, because we can copy what Aaron did, but we can't copy this. Why we can't copy this? I mean, it wasn't Aaron who did it. It's just because of the constellations did it. It's just our luck or lack of, right? Obviously, Paro did not believe in the existence of Hashem. We talked about that from the Barbanel. Rak Hashem, Moshe, but only the name that Moshe mentioned to him. He didn't really know who Hashem was. He only he was to him. It didn't make a difference. He has this whole the Ibn Ezra has this whole idea of what the different names, etc., etc. Anyway, so that's why Paro was unimpressed. Was one of my favorite words for being unimpressed. It was nonplussed. Look that up. It's a good word. Look at it's a good one. So anyway, so he was nonplussed by all this. The Ibn Ezra says the Khartoumim couldn't copy it, so they figured it's not God. It's not Aaron doing this. It's our gods. It's the stars. So that's why Paro said, okay, so I don't have to let the Jewish people go because it's just a bad luck. All right, that's what the Ibn Ezra says. Says the Ramban. He quotes the Ibn Ezra. Sorry, let's get to where he responds. His words are not correct in my eyes. This is a much gentler way than he usually speaks about the Ibn Ezra, but we'll go with it. All right, these words are not correct in my eyes. I disagree. In other words, why? Because a chance occurrence, this natural event, isn't called Etzbe Elokim. It's nature. It's everything. Everything can be Etzbe Elokim. The Etzbe Elokim should be some sort of like surprise. This amazing event is Etzbe Elokim. Really? Every event is. I'm breathing. That's Etzbe Elokim too, right? That's not enough. We know we've heard before from the Ramban that there's a huge distinction between natural miracles and unnatural miracles. Etzbe Elokim, says the Ramban, Rak hamaka haba me'ito ma'onesh tzikare yad Hashem ve'etzbe Elokim, and only something that comes from Hashem directly as a punishment is called the hand of Hashem, or perhaps finger of Hashem. So in other words, kasher nemar katuv ve'vivi lo yudei anago banu. So as it says, as Ibn Ezra himself points out in quotes a verse in Shmuel, his hand did not strike us, etc., etc. So in other words, it can't be what the Ibn Ezra said, because if the Ibn Ezra is right, then everything's a natural event, and every natural event should be Etzbe Elokim. And Ibn Ezra himself admits that elsewhere that this kind of metaphor of Hashem using his hand or his finger or something like that is some sort of a punishment. So what's going on? Aval, he says, here's his kipshuto, his simple explanation anyway. In kipshuto, the plain explanation is ki b'ra'ot ha'hartumim shelo yachlu hotzi et hakinim hodu lebasa Aaron shem me'et Elokim. What they realized was they were not able to make these lice And that admitted, basically, they had to admit that it was Aaron doing it, and it was a miracle from Hashem. The exact opposite of what the Ibn Ezra said. And that is why Pharaoh didn't call them back in to do this, right? After this point. So he's been calling them in for Dam. He called them in to copy Tzvardeya, but after Kinim, after they're unable to do it, as it says, and then they call it Es Belakim, after that point, he stops calling them in. He doesn't try to get them to copy Arbe or Barad or anything else, right? He's done calling them in for that purpose. Amru Es Belakim, V'lo Amru Yad Elokim, and they try to minimize the matter. They tried to make it like it wasn't such a big deal by saying it was the finger of Hashem. Really, they knew it was the hand of Hashem. Kolomar Maka Katana. This is just a small Maka. It's not a big deal. Don't worry about these lice that are eating you alive. Right? V'lo Amru Etzbel Hashem. They don't say that it was the finger of Hashem using the name of Yud K and Vav K. They said it said Elokim Kiparo ve'avadav v'lo yaskiru Hashem am yuchad. Rak b'dabram im Moshe, because they only would mention this name of Hashem, the Yud and Hey, and Vav and Hey, only when they were talking to Moshe, Avur Shehu Yeskiren Olahem, because that was the name that he mentioned to them. He's got more to say on this topic, but basically, what he's saying is that it's the Ramban's opinion that when you make something from nothing, he's going to tell us. When you make yesh ma'ayin, that's something that only Hashem can do, and nobody else can copy that. And that's why the Khartoumim could not copy this, is because they basically, the Lysur came out of nothing. And that's something that they could not do. That's when they recognized that it had to come from some higher power than themselves. And that's why Pharaoh never called for their help again. Now, we should probably mention, like I said before, Rashi's famous answer of why they called it Etz Be'elokim. So Rashi says, Maka zo ena al yedei keshafim. This particular plague could not be done through magic. It had to come from Hashem. So there's different explanations why he says that it has to come from Hashem. But let's see what Rav Chaim Kanievsky says on the topic. Rav Chaim Kanievsky Shlita says, he quotes the Vilna Gaon in chapter 5 of Pirkei Avot, the Kol HaMakot K'tiv Shelo Yeh B'Bnei Yisrael Bilvad Hakinim. So there's a whole discussion. It's a long discussion. We're not going to get into it right now. But the question really is, and I know some of you who grew up with the Midrash that says that all the plagues affected the Egyptians and none of the plagues affected the Jews, but happens to be not all opinions are in agreement with this, including the Rambam, including Ibn Ezra, and perhaps even Rashi. Maybe next year we'll look at the Sichot of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, where he actually discusses this Rashi in quite some detail. But aside from that, for now, the Vilna Gaon himself says, only Kinim affected the Jewish people. So all the other 9 plagues did not affect the Jewish people. Why did this happen? All the other plagues could have theoretically been done through magic, or shade, or through some demon. So there's a lot of other possible ways in which a plague can be done, in theory, through Kabbalistic means or whatever. And so this particular one is the only one that has to be done by Hashem, though. Why? Because he points out, usually it mentions that the Jews were unaffected by the other plagues, because it made it clear by saying that the Jews, that the plagues were miraculous. But it didn't need to do that here. It didn't even need to mention that the plague didn't affect, the plague did not affect the Jews. Why? Because of what we're saying above, because this had to come from Hashem. This wasn't through some sort of miracle. This wasn't through some sort of magic or mysticism or anything else. This had to come directly from a spiritual source, and that's why we didn't need to mention here that the Jewish people were unaffected, even though obviously they were. Okay. Okay, we're going to skip a little bit to the next chapter, chapter 9, verses 1 through 7. Okay, we're going to look at a beautiful Malbim here. Very important idea. So it says here, there's 2 verses. And this is the plague of Dever, of when the livestock, the animals of the Egyptians got sick and died. On the next day, Hashem did this particular plague. V'yamat kol miknei Mitzrayim, all of the livestock of the Egyptians died. V'miknei bnei Israel lo meit echad, and from the livestock of the Jewish people, not one died. Lo meit echad. Try to remember that phrase. Those 3 words. Lo meit echad. Not one died. Right? Vishlach Pharaoh, and Pharaoh sent his reporters, CNN, right? Whatever, he sent his reporters out to check. Hine lo meit miknei Israel ad echad, and he found that I don't even know how to translate this into English. Only not one died. So, in other words, for sure none died, but it's a weird phrasing. V'yichbad lev Paro, and then Paro's heart became stronger. V'lo shilach etam, he did not send the people, as usual. So let's see how Safari translated. He found that not a head of the livestock of Israel had died. Not a head. Okay. So again, so we have the phrase lo meit echad in verse 6, and in verse 7, lo meit mimikni Israel ad echad. Ad usually means until. Usually. So let's see what the Malbim says. So Malbim says on these verses, Hashem did these particular plagues, as is mentioned in the verse. V'lo al yedei Moshe v'Aaron. It wasn't Moshe and Aaron didn't do this one. It says Hashem did it directly. V'yas Hashem et davar hazeh. It wasn't like the Moshe had to wave his stick. It wasn't Aaron didn't have to do it. Nobody had to do it. It happened directly from Hashem. Achar shesader zeh ba lebarad hashgacha b'pratit. So by doing this, he made it clear that it was him doing this, and he's in control of this hashgacha that we talked about earlier, of this providence of supervising the world. Okay. Barad lahem she'ein tzarich la'atzmit ki hu atzmo hamashgiach v'ha'osa. So by doing this himself, he proved that not only he's supervising, he is the doer, he is the active participant in the world. And then he, on the next part, v'lo meit mikna Yisrael ad echad, kama shekatuv l'kaman, as it says later on, lo nishar b'hem ad echad. So later on, at the Sea of Reeds, when the Egyptians were drowning, it says not one survived. Perish Chazal answer, Sheparo Nishar. Paro remained. In other words, when it uses that phrase ad echad, until one, Malbim wants to say that means literally one remained, except for one. Ad meaning except for. So when the Egyptians died and only one remained, and it was Pharaoh, and Pharaoh was doing teshuvah, etc., as we find out later on in other midrashim. Ratzaloma sheperush ad v'lo ad bichlal she'echad nishar. When it says ad, when it says until, it literally means except for, and it means that something remained. And so it's his opinion. He explains it's his opinion that when it came to this particular plague, one of the animals belonging to a Jew did die. In other words, not like the first opinion. There's two verses, right? The first verse says, so from the livestock of the Jews, not one died. Now, when Pharaoh sent somebody to go investigate, they found that indeed, contrary to that, something did die. One animal did die. And which animal? Whose animal? What are we talking about? So he says, let's see. Yeah. So Yeshloma Shaya Behemat Ben Haisha Israeli. This animal belonged to the one Jewish woman who had relations with an Egyptian. Okay, forced relations, and he was born. He's the one who would later on be they call it Ben Ish Mitzri, and he was the one who would later curse Hashem and be punished in the book of Devarim. No, but Midbar, sorry. Right, according to Jewish law, he was a Mitzri. So, so according to us, he was considered a Jew. Sorry, according to us, according to our law, since after the Torah was given, we had matriarchal descent. There's anybody born to a Jewish mother is Jewish. Before that, if somebody born to a Jewish father was Jewish, right? Which is why the Shvatim are allowed to marry non-Jewish women, and their children were Jewish, unless they converted, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to get into all that right now. But simple explanation is that to be Jewish until the Torah was given, it was patriarchal. It came from the father. To be Jewish afterwards came from the mother. So according to our law, he was a Mitzri, right? Because he was born to an Egyptian father. But Pharaoh considered him to be Jewish. That's why Pharaoh's heart became hardened, because he sent somebody to find out if any animals died. And according to the Jewish people, nobody's animal died. But according to Egyptian law, in a Jewish person, because he's part Jewish, he's a half-blood prince, whatever. So he's got the Jewish blood in him, and therefore he is Jewish according to their law, very similar to the Nazis, Yimach Shemam. So it doesn't matter what percentage Jewish. If you have some Jewish blood in you, it's good enough for them to call you a Jew. So same thing here. When Pharaoh sent somebody to go investigate if any Jewish animals died, indeed, according to their opinion, a Jew's animal died. So that's all he needed to strengthen his heart and not let the Jewish people go. We're going to skip forward a little bit, just a few verses, about 7 verses, to 9:14. Tet Yud Daled. By the way, if you want more on the earlier part of the parsha, which we I don't want to say we skipped, but we sort of like brushed over it very quickly. Last year's class, we focused a lot on the beginning before getting into the plagues. So here I'm trying to sort of not cover up for it, but to make up for it by telling you more about the plagues. You can combine the two classes in your free time, while you're cooking for Shabbat or whatever. Just make sure it's delicious.
Sorry. Who said the except one or like only one?
That was the Malbim.
Malbim, and then who brought up the whole idea of Ad Echad? Just Malbim.
Yeah, that's still the Malbim. Yeah, it's the same idea. Ad Echad. Yes. Yes. Okay. So 9:14. Kibapam hazot. Moshe tells Pharaoh, this time, and you shaleach et kol megofatai. And we said we're going to get back to this verse later. Here's later. I'm going to send all of my plagues on you now. Al libcha, on your heart. Ve'avadecha ve'amcha be'avur teda ki ein kamoni b'chol haaretz. So you should know, this is Moshe speaking in the name of Hashem, so that this gonna affect your heart and your servants and your people, so you will know that I am the God over the whole world. There's nothing like me at all. Ein kamoni b'chol haaretz. There's nothing like me anywhere else. Writes the Khatam Sofer. The Khatam Sofer wants to know, why now? Why this particular plague? Otherwise, you could have doubts. You think maybe there's Hashem, maybe there isn't Hashem. Now, oh boy, now you're going to know. Now you're going to know that I am Hashem. So there, like I said, a ton of explanations. But I like I think this one has a lot to. All of them have a lot to offer us. But I think you'll enjoy this. Again, he quotes the verse, and you shalech et migofatai el libcha, etc. Yira, the Amar lo ad achshav. He says, until now, as if like, until now you didn't know. Hayita lo Omar she'en yocholet Hashem la'asot yoter mimakot ha'ele. You might have thought Hashem can't do more than these plagues. Ki alulai kein maya mona maniach miad paro mitzrayim mekulo velo hamantem ki Hashem ha'arich acher H-Shem v'gam rotza likadesh shemo al yadcha ba'olam. So up until now, you might have thought, Hashem really can't do very much to me. Like, what's he going to do? The evil people are still on the earth. Here I am. I'm Pharaoh. If I'm the bad guy, I seem to be doing okay. So obviously, this God isn't so very powerful. But now now I'm going to send all of my plagues on you. What does that mean? Shekvar avru ani sholeach ota ata al libcha l'teit lev alehem ba'avur zot hamadaticha. So up until now, I've been sending you these plagues to give you warnings, so you could so you would avoid this situation. Ata al libcha l'teit lev alehem. So right now, though, and I did all that so that you'd be able to say, basically, admit my name, b'chol haaretz, realize how great I am in the world. Shari ata, but now, the makat barad ani mizaricha l'tuvcha shalach oz, etc. So it says, but now I'm sending this plague of barad, of hail, and I'm warning you for your good. So that people who are afraid might be able to hide from this barad and not die. So in other words, I'm not trying to take life. I'm not trying to kill you. I'm giving you advice for your good. Hashem does not want the evil people to die. And that's why you should place your heart onto all the plagues. In other words, it's not that this particular plague is so much worse, so much scarier than all the others. It's the other way around. The fact that I've let you survive up until this point, and even now I'm giving you warnings so that you'll hide and not get hurt by this plague, should show you what kind of a God I am. I'm not just trying to kill you, trying to find different ways to torture you. That's not what this is. This is me trying to save you, trying to help you, trying to help you do teshuvah. Hashem does not want even the deaths of these terrible people. And this is one of the reasons why you might remember why we don't there's a famous Gemara Midrash that says that the angels wanted to sing praises of Hashem after he killed the Egyptians at the Reed Sea. That's 2 parshas from now. And Hashem says, no, I don't want you to sing my praises right now, because my children are dying. I've killed these people. All people are Hashem's children. He cares about them all. Evil people, good people, obviously Hashem cares about, but there's no reason, there's nothing to be happy about when evil people die. We should actually be sad that an evil person died and that he did not get the opportunity to do teshuvah. On the other hand, we should be happy. Obviously, there's something to be happy in the fact that evil has left this world and will no longer hurt people. pretty relevant nowadays. Okay, 9:23. We have time for this. I think yes. I think we can do this. 9:23. Tet Chav Gimel. So another comment from the Malbim. Vayet Moshe et mitat Matehu. Moshe took out his the staff al Shemayim into the heavens of Hashem. Natan kolot varad. Hashem brought out sounds and hail, thunder, lightning, thunder. That's the kolot. Is the thunder of a tihalach eish, and there was fire arza on the land. V'yamter Hashem barad al eretz Mitzrayim, and then Hashem sent hail onto the land of Egypt. Question: why is the thunder and the hail described differently?
You're saying like there's thunder in one thing?
Yes, and there's hail in the other. It's could have. Oops, do you still hear me? It could have said that he sent barad v'kolot ala eretz Mitzrayim. It just says barad. So it's just a different language. Now, of course, the Malbim has a long piece about this, and I invite you to take a look at when you get a chance. But we're just going to look at some of it right now. That what did Moshe say? I don't have it here with me. I should probably. So when Moshe said, it says right here, "Hinei mamtik et machar," tomorrow, v'sharat sharita al hakotel, v'hoyedia, he made a mark on the wall, v'yudua sheberega zu, at this particular time, shegia hatzel l'sharita, when the shade would cover up that particular mark, zu yatchil habara. That's when hail would start. So the Egyptians were very careful. They were medaktikin. They were investigating. They were trying to make sure that it would happen exactly when he said. Why? And so, so at that particular point, they knew that the plague had started, and they knew that to hide, to whatever they needed to do to survive and to keep their animals safe. They knew when that would happen. That's why he did that. But what do you know about thunder and storms? They don't happen at the same time. Right? Usually you hear the thunder before you see the lightning, because the sound of the speed of sound and the speed of light are different speeds. So it wouldn't have been at that exact same moment. So what would happen if he said that there would be thunder and hail at this particular moment, and there wouldn't be thunder at that moment? The thunder would happen, and that shade wouldn't have hit that mark yet. What would they say? Oh, he's not much of a prophet, is he? He's just guessing that there's going to be a storm. He's just a regular meteorologist, like Channel 10 or whatever. So I don't know. No offense to the Channel 10 meteor. I don't even know who it is. Whatever it is. I haven't seen a meteorologist in years. So that's the point here, is that it would open it up to criticism. And once you do that, you are taking away the opportunity for there to be a big Kiddush Hashem. So what happened? So this a very special thing happened, says the Malbim. So that barad, that thunder, it started crackling at that exact same second when that shade hit that mark on the wall. When the hail started falling, that's exactly when the thunder started. And that's why the language of the verse is what it is, to point out that this is an unusual thunder. Is thunder such that it was very, very obviously coming from Hashem, right? And then the fire came. Shehu Esh Habarak. That what fire are we talking about? We're talking about lightning. Right? That's that's what happens. So these kinds of miracles were necessary at that time to prove that these moments are proof that Moshe's prophecy was true. And that's what made it so that the Egyptians, at least, were supposed to convince Pharaoh to let the Jewish people go. And eventually we know they did, or they tried to, and that's the idea. So that's just some ideas from the Parsha. Of course, there's a lot more to say. And like I said, we skipped a lot of the Rav Hirsch. If you're intimidated by Hebrew, you could definitely look up the source sheet to look at the English there from the translation of Rav Hirsch. I just want to also say, just to remind you, as we said before, this class was sponsored by Robert and Claire Siegel in memory of Robert's mother, Rivka Bat Baruch, and Hashem Shav and Aliyah should be a zchut for us and for her family. And for all of us, we should continue to learn Torah together and realize that Hashem is in charge of the world. Hashem is still here. There's still Hashgacha, and Moshe's prophecy was true and continues to be true. And we should all see Simcha together. Thank you for listening. I'm going to stop the recording and the live to Facebook. And if there's any questions, that would be a good time to bring them up.
Rob, now